it's because you've allowed that person close enough to know you good enough to say things that hurt you.
Because you've been completely vulnerable with that person. So it
is a courageous act. Welcome to the Savage Servant Podcast. My name is Jason.
My name is Nick.
Today we're going to be vulnerable.
You're not going to touch me.
I mean, today we're going to talk about vulnerability, a word that I cannot stand. I dare say hate.
Yeah, I know. We've discussed it at length, and you definitely do. Why do you hate the word vulnerability?
Okay, so I don't hate the word. What I cannot stand about vulnerability is what has become of it, and the association that I have with it now to this linkage of victim mentality. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be my true self on social media so that people know what I go through and people can relate to me. And it's really just this session of complaining about
woes me.
Yeah, and how many points can I get in the victim category in order to make myself seem almost more righteous by being a victim?
Yeah.
That's what I hate. Because people will literally say, I'm just being vulnerable. These are my truths. I'm being vulnerable. And it really is just an excuse to complain. It has no purpose.
None.
And that's what we wanted to talk about today, is being vulnerable with a purpose. But what do you think of when you think of vulnerable? What definition are you using to make it a positive thing, not a victim thing?
So when I think of being vulnerable, I think about it from like your family, your friends, people that are close to you, that you've shared, sensitive information with, your emotions, and you can allow yourself to bring that wall down and just kind of be vulnerable with them in that moment that you're sharing with them something that has been a big impact in your life. So you hold something close to your heart, or that you hold someone close to your heart, or discussing something that has happened to you in your life that has been very traumatic. Just letting people in. And I think a lot of times now, people associate, like you said, being vulnerable with having this victim mentality. Now, you can be vulnerable, but you don't want to be the victim in trying to get everybody to pay attention to you, by saying the "oh, woe's me" thing all the time without having a solution to your own problems, or at least looking for one. Because if not, nobody is going to care what you say, think, or feel if that's what you're constantly doing. Because, there's always something positive to look forward in life. And people that just complain all the time, I can't stand.
Everybody's had that person in their life. Everybody knows somebody who complains all the time, or always has a reason why they can't get through whatever's going on.
Water's not wet enough.
Yeah, just something, right? There's something that's going on. So that is not vulnerability as far as I'm concerned. It's you're a victim.
Yeah.
And that there's too much of, and as men, we don't need any more men to be like that. We have plenty.
Yeah.
So that's a good definition, I guess. It's a better place to come from, right?
Yeah.
You're being open, you're letting the guard down, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? So you're not keeping people at arm's length. You're letting them past that point of getting further in than they could potentially know things that could do you harm.
Yeah,
right?
And that's you're allowing yourself to,
I get that. I think that is a good place to come from. It's being vulnerable with a purpose is what we talked about. I keep coming back to that, because being open with your family, being open with your friends, you're doing it in order to help them understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And that is, quote unquote, being vulnerable. But you're doing it so that you can either move forward and they can understand why you did something, said something, where you were coming from with something, If you are trying to explain something and they're just not getting it, a lot of times it's because they don't know where you're coming from. They don't know the things that have happened in the past that have made you think like this, or the people that you have seen things happen to, whatever it is. They don't know your experience with it. And so that is with a purpose. Also, I think that when men are trying to have empathy with someone else, that is a good place to have vulnerability, as far as, hey, you're going through this, like, as my friend, like, you're going through this, I went through this, I understand this is what I did to get out of it, or, hey, I'm struggling with this too, let's help each other get to the other side of it. But like you said, it has a result at the other end of it. It has this is how we're going to move forward, or this is how I did move forward. It's not, oh yeah, that's really hard, I struggle with that too. Like, what's the purpose of that then? Like, just to make the other person feel better because somebody else is like going through the same thing.
It might be like attention seeking. Like, I don't really, everybody has their own reason as to why, but being both empathetic and sympathetic towards, somebody that you are being intimate with, because that's, essentially what it is. You're intimately sharing your feelings with them, or your thoughts about something you've experienced, or that was similar to what they're going through, to help relate, to bring that. That's kind of like trying to create a stronger bond with somebody by doing that. But a lot of people that are doing it nowadays aren't interested in building bonds with anybody. They do it for, attention-seeking purposes. And that's not the way it should be used, because that doesn't build lasting relationships in any way, shape, or form.
It doesn't make the world better either. It makes the world worse. You're complaining, you're competing over victim points, and at the end of the day, how has anything gotten better?
And a lot of men, there's a huge stigma being a man, that being vulnerable makes you weak. And that is far from the truth. And it takes a lot more courage and strength to be vulnerable with the people that you love and care for, because you're being open, you're being honest with them. And they see that behind that tough exterior, that there's someone behind that wall that's vulnerable, that has feelings, has certain emotions that you may relate to. And like I said, doing all of that allows that person to get a little closer to you. And that's a huge part of building, lasting and loving relationships, especially with your girlfriend, your wife, or, someone that you love very much.
The thinking that it makes you weak looks like it comes from the victim piece of it, though. The view of it now. I don't think that people would think it was weak if we didn't have that going on at the same time. Because if people only saw it as like, okay, I'm being vulnerable, like I'm teaching my friends, my family about me, I'm letting people in, like it is, you would be able to see it that way. The societal view of it, the normalcy of it now, to be vulnerable, it makes more sense why people think it's a weak thing coming from that.
Because it's more, both sides are more pronounced though.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just, before it was just like, oh, you can't be vulnerable because men aren't supposed to be weak. And you didn't have this whole other social media side that was promoting so much of it and using it and abusing it in a way that it shouldn't. And now they're both trying to coexist. And now they're, some people are thinking like they overlap, and they don't. So it's hard to like draw that line like, hey, I'm being vulnerable. I'm not a victim in any way. I'm just letting you know that these things exist inside of me. They may in you as well.
So not being read from that 70s show and not letting everybody, like, just being a dick to everybody. Like, I have no feelings.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, so that's the other side of it. That makes sense too. So not being like the machismo piece of it. There's that in between. Like, you're letting people in, but you're not being a victim.
And it's more of a nurturing side too, because you have to be nurturing, in any relationship that you're in that you want to, to grow. And being vulnerable definitely, at some points, and showing that you're not a victim and it isn't a weak point, is very nurturing to that other person and to you.
Yeah, sometimes it's harder to explain where you're coming from and let the people around you know why you think like that, or where you're coming from. It's harder to do that than it is to just put that wall up. So it would make sense that there's not a weakness to that it actually takes some courageous steps on your part, because it is easier to sometimes just put that.
Oh, it's a lot easier to build a wall than to sit there and just be like, hey, I'm going to be open and honest with you about something, kind of like, don't step on my feelings kind of a thing. You hope that whoever you're relaying it to is receiving it well, and that they take it into consideration and understand you better, or like you said, they understand the current situation of where you are, maybe you are in that relationship, and what direction you're going in.
Yeah, because you do allow the people that you're vulnerable with, it innately gives them the ability to hurt you, right? So, like we talked about with arguments, the reason that they're so hard to get through with your spouse, it's because you've allowed that person close enough to know you good enough to say things that hurt you.
Because you've been completely vulnerable with that person. So it
is a courageous act, because it's a lot easier. It would be weaker to not let them close enough.
And if they've been vulnerable with you, you both have the power per se in your hand, because you're holding that person's vulnerability to hurt them in the deepest of ways. And that's why being vulnerable is such a huge trust-based thing. You're like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to say this, I'm going to show you this, but please don't use it against me.
Why do you think that builds relationships up? Why do you think that is a necessary part of the relationship? Is it just trust?
I think one is based on trust, and two, I think that so many people go through the same situations in life and have the same emotions that they don't really put out into the public because they don't want to get hurt. And when you get the chance to be vulnerable with somebody, when you get the chance to be open and you're saying you love that person and they love you back, that's who you want to open that door to. You can be your most genuine self with that person. You're like, I haven't opened this door for anybody. I'm doing it for you. I'm letting you in. You're going to know all of me right now. Don't hurt me. Don't screw anything up on the inside of this, because I'm taking a big risk in doing that. So a lot of it comes from that trust.
So there's some value, you think, in just giving them the ability to hurt you?
Oh, without a doubt. That you could say this falls into love and relationships, because when you're deeply in love with somebody, or you're starting to have those feelings, or you're starting to trust them more, become attracted to them, you're lowering that wall. And behind that wall is everything that you protect internally, that you think about and feel every day. And you're allowing them to slowly take a view at it. And all of a sudden you can, like I said, open that door, and now they're in the room. That is a huge thing. That's like the control room of who you are. They have the ability now to walk in there anytime they want, because you allowed them access, and see all these things about you and know about you. But then they also have that love and respect for you to not do anything on the inside and use it against you.
Press random buttons.
Exactly. Just screwing everything up. And now you have this jumbled mess of, feelings on the inside because you let somebody in and they use them against you, which I have done to people, because I used to be just a terrible human being, and hadn't even started the path that I've been on now for many years. Again, it doesn't feel good to do that, and it doesn't feel good to have it done to you in any way. And that's why, even though we talked about in another episode, preserving your relationships, whatever they may be, husband, wife, girlfriend, friends, whatever it is, if you value that person, they've been vulnerable with you, do everything you can to build them up, not break them down.
The value I see in letting them into that control room, per se, is we're working as a team.
Yeah.
In any of our relationships, it's working towards ultimately the same goal, whether it's spouse relationship, whether it's child and parent relationship, or even just friends, right? There's always a common goal. So letting someone see all of the background to something gives them the ability to use that background against you, yes, but they may also see something that can help you move towards whatever that goal is, and they have more information to work with, and so therefore you can work through the things more efficiently and with more information, with the ability to really get to the goal that you both want more effectively, because they have all that background information, right? They're in the control room, they can see everything going on, so they can help work towards whatever that goal is. If it's your spouse, they can work towards that common life goal, life purpose, with all the information, because if they don't know why you want to get to where you're going, you may get to something similar, what they viewed as the goal, that you could potentially word in the exact same way, right? But it's not really what you wanted, because there's all this missing background to it, and it's taken out of context, and so they can't work towards the exact same thing because they don't understand the exact same thing.
Yeah. And it gives them the ability to be vulnerable as well.
Yeah.
It's like, you're both testing the waters, and once one person, shows that they're being vulnerable and open, it kind of like lowers your walls as well, and you guys can, both kind of proceed as the relationship would, but on a much deeper level. From a Christian standpoint, I think being open and real with God is a huge form of vulnerability, because we need to talk to Him every day, especially when we pray, because He knows and sees all. Honest with who you are and how you feel, and acknowledging the parts of yourself that you would rather keep hidden. A lot of times we don't even acknowledge some things that we bury deep within ourselves that we really need to bring to the surface, or turn around or face those demons in the mirror, because it will not allow you in any way, shape, or form to move forward within yourself, within your marriage, within your job, any relationships that you value. You have to kind of be vulnerable with yourself, like, hey, it's okay to admit that I was this person, I did say those things, I did those actions, I'm not proud of it, I'll never do it again, and these are the steps I'm taking to ensure that that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. Your relationship with God is just like your relationship with anyone else. Letting Him in to those deep places, despite Him already knowing about them.
Yeah.
Allowing Him to do that work in those spaces that you try to keep hidden, that aren't perfect, is number one of the only ways you're going to ever get better in those places, right? Yeah. And your relationship with God is meant to be your most vulnerable state. It's meant to be your most intimate relationship. If you can't bring it to God, then you can allow it to be used against you in so many ways.
Because you're just running from it.
Well, yeah, and the things that you try to hide are always going to be the things that the enemy uses to play with and to make you more insecure, make you make other bad decisions. So there's so many ways that it can go wrong.
Oh yeah, it just spirals out of control.
So I think that's a good point. The vulnerability with God is another huge piece of it.
You got to give yourself some grace, and pray for God's as well.
Despite Him knowing everything, you still have to have the willingness to pray and bring it to Him. That's something that is easily overlooked.
All the time, because, we want to take the wheel. We want to drive instead of sitting in the passenger seat and let God take the wheel and do what, He has to do. And until you do that, your life really is never going to change, because you've been driving the car the whole time. And for some of us, for me personally, I ask myself, like, how well did that work?
Yeah, well,
didn't.
It's in not even just letting things go, but being able to let God into all the pieces, right? Sometimes we want to keep certain parts out of a relationship with God.
Yeah.
And
It's impossible.
well, it's impossible to have the real relationship
Yeah.
without. It's like having being married and this part of my life, like these friends I'm just gonna keep to this. It's gonna keep out of the marriage, right? Like that's not sharing a life.
Yeah.
You can't keep parts of your life separate and parts of your life like it's coming together. And how many places in the Bible do they compare your relationship with God and Jesus as to being, married, being together? You that should be your most intimate relationship. So yeah, you have to let him into all of it.
Yeah. I agree.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, until next time,
Be a savage.
be a servant.